Hey, good evening and Happy New Year. My name is Dan Derry, and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. Hey, welcome back in 2019. We are going to begin a new series this evening, and it is in Matthew 16, 27, and 28. Now, obviously, what we're going to look at is that, number one, this text prophesies the second coming of Jesus Christ according to Old Testament prophecy. And number two, that the second coming of Christ, as prophesied in Matthew 16, 27, 28, was fulfilled in the first century generation. Listen, the reason I want to do this study is not because you've never heard this before, not because you don't believe this. Some of you might, some of you might not. But it's because this text is, in my opinion, the key to understanding the doctrine of the second coming, the parousia of Christ. And if we will have a working knowledge of this text, whenever we approach futurists concerning this topic, concerning the time and the nature of the second coming of Christ, we will have the ammunition, we will have the answers to refute all of their objections concerning this text. Listen, let me just kind of give an example of what I hope these studies will do for you. Have you ever been in a discussion or an argument or a debate with a futurist, and you're trying to prove a first century second coming of the Lord because you understand this, you see this so clearly, you lay out an argument and it's airtight, man. I mean, they cannot refute it and you know it. And you just kind of look at them and you're not pushy, but you say, hey, what do you think? Like, can you refute it? What do you think about it? And you know they can't, and they know they can't. So instead of trying to refute it, they just shift the focus and they say, yeah, well, if that's true, then what about this or what about this? And you, in your zeal to answer every question, that's me, you jump and try to answer this and try to answer that rather than staying focused and just pressing your arguments until they either give in to the arguments or deny the scriptures. That's kind of how I feel about Matthew 16, 27, and 28. We can present an argument from this passage that is so powerful, so definitive, so undeniable, that if we just press the argument and press it and press it and have all this information and all this evidence surrounding it to prove a first century second coming of Christ, that futurists will either be forced to admit the truth of a first century parousia, of the truth of covenant eschatology, or they will, as I have experienced, just flat out deny the inspiration of Scripture. And at that point, the argument's over. There's no sense in even talking with people if they're just going to deny Scripture, that it's inspired, that it plainly teaches what it teaches. So once again, I want to get into this study to give you the tools, the understanding, and to grow in the understanding myself. I don't know all there is to know about this text, not even close. I'm going to be growing and learning as we go through these studies. But I want to be able to give you an argument that is so airtight and so powerful and so compelling that when you approach futurists with this information, that they must, if they are sincerely honest, bow the knee to the truth of a first century second coming of Christ. And listen, before I just get into a brief outline of where we're going to go in the next few videos, let me quote James Stuart Russell, who, as a 19th century theologian, wrote a phenomenal book called The Parousia. He believed in a first century second coming of Christ, and he placed Matthew 16, 27 as a key to understanding that entire doctrine. Watch this. He says this: "This remarkable declaration is of the greatest importance in this discussion and may be regarded as the key to the right interpretation of the New Testament doctrine of the parousia." He goes on, "This passage alone contains so much important truth respecting the parousia that it may be said to cover the whole ground, and rightly used will be found to be a key to the true interpretation of the New Testament doctrine on this subject." Russell placed Matthew 16, 27, 28 as a key, as a foundational text to understanding the doctrine of the second coming. In my opinion, it is a prophetic bridge between the Old Testament prophets and the New Testament apostles. It is the most important text, in my opinion, to understanding this great and powerful doctrine. Now, here's where I want to go in the following videos. I'm just going to give you a brief outline of some of the things we'll be looking at in Matthew 16:27. And by the way, everything that I'm going to list here is what the futurists ignore. And that's why they confuse this scripture so badly. Okay? First of all, we're going to look at the immediate context of Matthew 16. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Well, the context, as we'll see, begins all the way back up in Matthew 16, verse 13. Okay? So we're going to look at the context of the text. Number two, we're going to look at the prophetic source of that context. Another way to say it, we're going to look at the context of the context. And this is really cool because I saw these for the first time a couple months ago, and it blew me away. Between verses 13 and 27 of Matthew 16, Jesus is drawing from Psalm 2, Psalm 110, and 2 Samuel chapter 7. That is the foundation of the context of Matthew 16, 27, 28. It is so important to understand that before we even get into the text. Number three, we're going to look at the Old Testament source for Matthew 16, 27, 28. In other words, where was Jesus drawing from? Where was he quoting? Was Jesus just making up these phrases, the Son of Man, coming in his kingdom, every man according to his works? No. Jesus was quoting directly from Old Testament prophecies, and we're going to prove that those prophecies prophesied the second coming of Christ. And if Jesus quoted from second coming prophecies in Matthew 16, 27, then that means that Matthew 16, 27 and 28 prophesied the second coming based upon Old Testament scripture. This is just simple logic. And the last thing we're going to do as we go through these studies is we're going to look at where in the New Testament, that is in the epistles and in the book of Revelation, where the apostolic writers quote from Matthew 16, 27, 28 when prophesying the second coming of Jesus. In other words, Matthew 16, 27 isn't just the fulfillment of Old Testament second coming texts, it's the fulfillment of New Testament second coming texts. The New Testament writers quote Matthew 16, 27 and 28 when they prophesy the parousia of Jesus Christ, that is his second coming, which proves, again, that Matthew 16, 27 and 28 was not fulfilled at Pentecost, it was not fulfilled at the Ascension, it was not fulfilled at the Transfiguration, as futurists try to tell us. But Matthew 16, 27, again, according to Old Testament prophecy and New Testament apostles, prophesied the final, consummated, eschatological second coming of Jesus Christ, and it was fulfilled at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. This is going to be an amazing study, and once again, I simply want to give you a powerful key that when you sit with futurists, that when you try to express and communicate the glory and the wonder of fulfilled prophecy, that we understand, that we see that you have an argument so powerful, so concrete, so undeniable, and that you'll have the courage to press this argument and press it and press it. And you'll be able to prove this argument from many, many different ways, from both the Old Testament and the New, and the context, and the language, and the grammar, etc., that those futurists, our brothers and sisters that desperately need this truth, will have nowhere to run. They will have nowhere to go except to embrace this truth or to deny Scripture. It is their decision, but I want to give you the tools and you the power within this text to put that truth in front of them and to help them understand what we see in the Scriptures. So, we'll jump into this next time on Answers on Eschatology. I'm looking forward to this. I hope you'll stay with me. This is going to be an amazing study on the second coming of Jesus Christ in Matthew 16, 27 and 28. God bless. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.